included my cell phone here. I believe the I believe the last slide here has my email address, but feel free. That's my personal cell phone number. Believe it or not, after the first two presentations, a whole bunch of people called me. I don't know. I think I got like 10 or 12 calls, and they were great. You know, some calls were quick, 5-minute little things, and some were half hour, 45-minute type calls. I absolutely loved it, and I think it was great, and we had some great discussions. So one of the things leading in, before I get to the next slide, as I think I alluded to, I'm 100% focused in on Durham. So, you know, if you do call me and say, hey, I'm thinking about this deal in Raleigh, and, you know, maybe it's a tear down and I might want to subdivide and maybe flag or build something, I would say, listen, I'm sorry. I don't know anything about Raleigh or Cary or Chapel Hill, the zoning code. You know, Kathy knows my joke is, you know, at night when I'm chilling, what am I doing on my phone? I'm reading the zoning code of Durham, or I'm on the MLS. So I know it extremely well. So if you come across any transactions, any deals in Durham, you know, it's funny when some wholesalers or brokers or other investors call me and they're like, well, I don't know. I can tell you generally where it is. I said, listen, I'm not scooping anyone here. I'm in this for the long game. I'll be doing this for the next 30 years. You could just tell me, you know, I'm also an attorney. I don't, you know, I don't necessarily practice, but hey, attorney-client privilege, I'd be more than happy to say, hey, you can talk to me in confidence. It's all about making sure the deal is right and providing whatever advice I can to help. So, but that is the caveat that I'm extremely good in Durham. Raleigh specific, property specific questions, I might have to defer you out. But so as I said in the first two presentations, just to make sure that, you know, you all know that I'm not some random person that they pulled off of the street, I'll just hit my background quickly. That, you know, I started in 2008, so going on for quite some time now. That's when I got my real estate license and started practicing. As soon as I passed it, I bounced around various brokerage companies, some of the big ones, small ones, whatsoever, just trying to get my feet wet and get going. I was also in law school, graduated law school, but, you know, while I was practicing law, real estate was always my primary focus, you know, especially when I purchased my first investment property in 2011. It's kind of funny, up on Facebook the other day, it said, oh, here's your memory from whatever, 10 years ago, whatever it was. And there it is, 2518, or I think that's what it was, 2581 Ross Road pops up. And that was my Facebook post for my first ever. And certainly things have changed. So that was it. I literally started from zero, my own money, everything that I made, whether I was practicing law, court appointed stuff, or operating as a real estate broker, all of my brokerage commissions and everything. You know, I was so lucky that, you know, my wife had this, you know, she was in med school, she was on stipend, we had a very affordable mortgage that, you know, there was very minimal risk for us at that time for me to be just dumping everything that I made into my first few properties. And then, as you all know, once you get a few, it kind of starts to snowball slowly but surely, and it hits a point. I became really good at what I was doing. So just, and again, for just some extra money, became a certified real estate instructor, certified by the North Carolina Real Estate Commission, did application, writing samples, all that stuff, application, videos, all that stuff. And I got certified. So I was certified to teach brokers post-licensing, and then I was certified to teach continuing education. And I always make the joke, I mean, it's true, that when I was teaching, especially the BICUP, well, now it's called BICUP. Back then, I forget what it was, the broker in charge elective or broker in charge required course. I was often the youngest person in there. So it was quite an experience, and it was a big learning curve. And that's really where I started to learn real estate really well. Closed my first portfolio loan in 2013 after we had bought the first 5 or 6 properties. So that, as we dive into the lending stuff, you know, Matt, my partner, is really big on the lending and really takes that side of our company really all to himself. But you know, we consult and we talk about it quite often. So we have great lending experience. So that's another thing too. If you ever call me now, that could be outside of Durham for sure. So if you ever have any lending questions or anything, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about that. Loop you in with Matt. He would be more than happy to talk to you about that because he's very creative. And then I wrote my own continuing education manual working with residential investors, just to have a class with brokers and what it's like to work with residential investors, things to look at, things to assess. 2018, it was about a couple of weeks before my first daughter was born, closed on our first multi-million-dollar portfolio acquisition. It was 32 units or 36 units. It was 17 different properties, some single family, most multifamily. And it's kind of funny looking back and talking about it. And as we all know, inflation's raging. I mean, you'd be lucky to buy maybe 3 or 4 properties in a portfolio right now for 2.6. I mean, some parts of Raleigh, I'm sure that maybe two properties. It's kind of nuts what's going on right now with the valuations. But looking at it back then, I mean, we were extremely lucky for that opportunity. And that was all not on the market. That was all cold calling. That was all working with private owners. And this particular person, I had talked to him for 2 years before that. And finally was able to close on the transaction. And, I really thanked him at the end, and I thanked him for trusting me. I really did. And that's a big part of doing this, no matter what part of the business that you're in, and whether or not you're good on the phone, and whether or not you can make that connection, whether or not you can talk confidently. Do you know your market? Can you cite comps right off the top of your head? I mean, I had a discussion the other day where I rattled off 5 comps all within a 5-block radius of this person's property, and he was blown away. He was like, "Well, you clearly know your stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, I look at this every single day," and that immediately builds credibility. I mean, we're all drowned by these phone calls, and when I say we, property owners are drowned by these phone calls from all these 1-800 numbers and these scam risk people who just call and say, "I want to buy, I want to buy, I want to buy." Well, guess what? Sometimes those people do want to sell, but they're just so fatigued from all those nonsense calls. And one of the first things I say is, "Hey, I'm Tom Hennessey. I'm local. And by the way, if you are local, you better know your stuff and show them that they're local." I get so many times people call me and say, "Yeah, I'm local." I'm like, "And I'm an investor in Durham." "Great. Where do you own a property?" And they're like, "The phone goes silent," because they're lying. So, make sure you're able to build some form of connection and credibility that is actually verifiable. Just don't use a line out of nowhere. So anyway, sorry to go off on a tangent. I do that. But did the portfolio, and then we started building in 2019 when we developed a great relationship with our builder, and we have some awesome projects going on, and I'll talk about it today too. And then 2021, first commercial property, and actually we just acquired, I think this was after the last presentation, actually acquired my second piece of commercial property, which I can talk about later on. So currently, right now, I have 103 properties, 178 units, which comes in an approximate valuation of $35 million. So it's very strong. And like I said, we're very good because this is all not private equity money, not any kind of craziness. This was all the making of the last 12 years that we're able to do that. And it's something I'm very proud of. So no matter what presentation, no matter what we talk about, I do talk about building a foundation, as I alluded to, and knowing your market and being prepared to have those conversations no matter what you do, right? I am a firm believer, and I know people disagree with me on this because of the whole material fact thing, whatever. Like, that's, in my opinion, that's not significant. I'm a firm believer in getting your real estate license. If you're in real estate, I really believe you should have a license because for various reasons. One, and this leads into what we're talking about today about generating cash flow. You can generate cash flow in many different ways in real estate. And I think by not having your license, you're giving up a really good way to do it because you're going to come across deals. You're going to network. You're going to find people, and not every deal is right for you. But guess what? You have a seller who indicates that he or she wants to sell. And for whatever reason, the deal's not right for you, no matter what your strategy is. Why are you saying no to that owner and letting him or her drift off into the abyss where you lose connection when that might be a $300,000 transaction? When you say, you know what, you might not be ready for the MLS. You might not want to have 20 brokers go through your house. This might be a rental house because we all know what happens when you list a rental home for sale. For some reason, there must be some law that I'm not aware of, but the tenant thinks that he or she can stop paying rent. I don't know why. So it actually is a legitimate concern of some private landlords who want to sell, but don't want to disturb their tenant and don't want to tell the tenant that they are selling because some tenants just might think that's a free ride. I can't explain it, but it does happen. So what about going to that owner and saying, hey, I'm a licensed broker. I'm at ABC Realty. I know you don't want to put this on the MLS. I know you don't want your tenant to see it on Zillow. I know you don't want 20 people running through your house and disturbing your tenant. However, my office has 50 brokers, 20 brokers, 70 brokers. Let me do an office exclusive for you. Here's this form. I'm not going to send it out to the public, but I'm going to send it to my office, and I trust these people. And we're going to see. We're going to test the waters. Maybe there's someone who wants to pay you $300 or $325. But if you sign this agreement, I'd be more than happy to send it out there, give it a shot. We're not going to schedule any showings, but if we get some interest, then I can potentially do the deal for you. And guess what? What happens if it happens? Then that's a 3%, 2.5%, whatever it is. There you go. That's on a $300,000 transaction. That's $7,500 that you potentially just said no to. So that was something early on in my career too. While I held my broker's license, when I wasn't, like super busy with my own work, that I was able to generate cash flow. And what I did with that, I took everything and then I would just sock it away, or I put it to the next renovation, and that was just money that I didn't have to worry about because it was just a product of the work that I was already doing. So I think that's really great. So additionally, by getting your license, you don't have to bother anyone. You have rock solid MLS data. If a property is on the MLS, you have easy access to centralized showings. You can go and see it anytime you want. You buy the North Carolina real estate manual. You really learn up on the legality of it. You learn up on agency and zoning and contract law and how to do it. And you get access to the realtor, the jointly approved realtor forms, SPAR forms, everything, and you just look more legitimate. So, I know wholesalers have their own forms, and I don't know, some look good, some look bad, but it's kind of nice. You just send a very official form, and so that's my opinion on that. In addition to building a foundation, I do believe real estate is hard to do by yourself. And I know a few people and they kind of do it on their own. And I don't know, I think having a partner, certainly for me, I wouldn't be able to be where I am without Matt. And I think Matt would say the same thing. I mean, it really is, a perfect harmony of not only do we get along and not only are we friends and best buds, he's almost like a brother to me, that, we're not afraid to tell each other when the other one's wrong or when the other one is, and support the other for a job well done. And I think that's a tremendous relationship to have. There's not too many people around you that, will truly and speak honestly and say, hey, that's a terrible deal, or that's a phenomenal deal. Some might be just patting your back no matter what. And I think having a partner to bounce ideas, always to be there and have be a phone call away or a lunch away, I think that's tremendous. So we're going to get into the next bullet point a little bit. I just want to touch on it. CPA. If you're in real estate, you really should know about the pros of being a real estate professional in the eyes of the IRS, especially if you're married. We'll get into that a little bit later in terms of developing cash flow. But, hey, if you're married, you two have W-2 jobs, or even if your spouse has a W-2 job, your losses from passive activities, and they're not, they're paper losses. Again, we'll talk about that. May be able to flow through to your partners, to your spouse's active W-2 income. So, all the money that's withheld by his or her employer, well, hey, when you file your return, you're going to get a big fat refund in the mail. And not a lot of people know that. And that's one of the privileges and the gifts that the IRS tax code affords us all in real estate, that we have the ability to be a real estate professional and have the benefit to using those passive losses to offset active income. There's very few, if any, other professions that have that, and especially with the married filing jointly opportunities there. So getting that nice refund there, that's a great way to put some cash back in your pocket. So we talked about collaboration, compounding interest. We'll talk about that a little bit as when we talk about buying holds, and I alluded to knowing the market, and and of course, no matter what you do, I always say you have to adapt, right? You can't just say, hey, I'm a wholesaler, or I'm a broker, or I'm a flipper, or I'm a buy and hold, or I'm a builder. You're in the game. You never know who's going to call you. You never know when you cold call what they're going to say. You may be calling about X property, but they may have Y, and it might not just be Y. It might be Y times 4. And how are you going to make that happen? I think that's being able to adapt, and especially create a cash flow, as we'll talk about on some of the other slides coming up, how to do that, or at least how I do that. There's some unconventional ways. So this is a slide that I always put in, no matter what presentation I do, no matter what association, no matter where I am, I always tell everyone that there's three elements to every real estate deal that I look at. And I truly believe, whether it's a $200,000 deal or a $2 million deal or a $5 million deal, you always have to ask yourself, how am I creating value? How am I generating cash flow? And what is my tax strategy? Believe it or not, it sounds so simple. But those three things, not too many people take into account all three elements. Like I said, it sounds so simple, but if you could look at every single deal and how am I going to create value, how am I going to generate cash flow, and what's my tax strategy, I think that's what you got to do. So the picture right here is a historic renovation I did. It was a renovate to rent type transaction, in addition to a new build ADU in the back. So I bought a dilapidated house, very cheap, fixed it up, rented to some awesome tenants, rebuilt the garage, added on an accessory dwelling unit to the back of the garage. So technically it's 2 units on 1 lot. I think ADUs are super high in demand and popular right now. I think there's a tremendous rental market for that size of a product. And I think also on an exit strategy, if you do have one, or you should always think of it, whether or not you want to do it now or 10 years from now, I just think that makes it super desirable for an owner occupant, especially for a single family renovation that you're holding for rent. So how did I create value? Well, I created value because I renovated it pretty darn awesome. And it certainly had some built-in gains when we were done with it as compared to what I bought it for and how much I spent to fix it up. Is it generating cash flow? Surely it is. It's generating great rent. The tenant's been in there now, I think, going on 3 years. The ADU tenant's absolutely awesome. Then there's been some turnover there, but it's $975 a month. Great. And now taxes. 1, you can accelerate depreciation, and 2, since it's a historic structure and a contributing structure in a national historic zone, as long as we did the renovation correctly, pursuant to historical standards, which I did, you get historical preservation tax credits, which flow through to your personal tax returns. So you hit all 3 with that, and it turns into be a tremendous deal. So how did you generate cash flow? Well, you generated cash flow with your rental income, obviously. How did you generate cash flow with your taxes? Well, you got tax credit, so that reduced your burden. And in addition to your passive losses that might follow through, your taxes will limit your need on losses. You carry your losses forward, then you get a nice big fat refund at the end. Now, yeah, obviously it's your money, you're paying into it, but it's really nice to get a big fat check once you file your taxes and give you that little bump in your cash flow. And then of course the value, depending on how long you hold it, whether it's a year or 2 years, you let the asset mature a little bit, and then do you look at refining and pulling a little cash out so long as the rent support it. So then you generate some cash from your lender as well. So all 3 bullet points, while fundamental to every single deal, also have elements of creating cash flow as well. So obviously I've hit on it, and I'd love to see if people have show of hands, or if anyone wants to interrupt, just in case I missed anything. But these are some of the ways that I look to generate cash flow. I still hold a real estate license, so believe it or not, I could get referrals. Excuse me. So even if you're not actively representing investors or owner occupants, if you have your real estate license and your friend wants to buy a house and you just don't have the time for it, or a coworker, a colleague, what prevents you from referring that buyer or that seller? Your friend wants to sell the house, but you don't want to sell it for whatever reason. What prevents you from referring out that client to an active broker, who all they do is do brokerage transactions, and then you get a nice referral fee because you're a licensed broker and you're allowed to accept referrals. So I think that's another benefit of having your brokerage license. Wholesaling, I know that's very popular, especially now. I get calls almost every other day from wholesalers, whether they want to do double close or assignment. I've done just a tad of wholesaling. I'm in the middle of a crazy wholesale. You know, I'm going to get some water. Hold on one second.
Guys, don't forget, if you have any questions, you can jump in and ask or put them in the chat, and we'll make sure that Thomas gets them. So questions can go in the chat. Like, take yourself off mute.
So sorry for that. I had to grab some water. So I'm actually in the middle of a wholesaling transaction right now. So a friend of mine brought a deal to me that he knew. I won't get into too much of the details, but he gave me the opportunity to buy it. It was involved a courthouse process, and believe it or not, I wasn't upset. I wasn't upset not emotionally, but I wasn't upset at the courthouse. So believe it or not, we were able to secure the deal. And my buddy had been looking for a property for a while, and I said, hey, this really could fit for you. So I have the cash. I have pretty good access to capital. I'll buy it at the courthouse. The courthouse requires cash, and then I'll sell it to you. So I'm buying. I'm basically doing a double close, even though it's not a same-day double close or a back-to-back double close the very next day or anything like that. It's going to take a little bit of time because, you know, unfortunately, there's an occupant there, and things got a little hairy, not really good. There's some emotions and confusion there about the whole process. So it's going to be probably have to go the eviction route. And as I alluding to, it was actually the first time happened. My maintenance manager, unfortunately, this woman had a shotgun in her house, so opened the door holding a shotgun and said, "Get off my property," even though she doesn't own it, and she never had any ownership rights. It was her mom's, but yeah, first time ever after 12 years, someone showed a gun to our maintenance manager, and it was frightening. Believe it or not, the lady wasn't arrested. I guess it's not a crime to point a gun at someone when you're on your property. But so anyway, so we have to battle through that process. That one's a little bit more complicated, and having the right eviction attorney, certainly a good eviction attorney is critical, especially for wholesaling if you tend to take ownership and if it's occupied. Obviously, wholesaling a vacant property, that would be quite lovely and sometimes nice. And then that's another thing about being creative and generating cash flow. So one of the deals I did last year was I really wanted this one property on Guthrie, but the owner wanted to sell another one up in North Durham, and I'm not the biggest fan of North Durham. I don't have many properties up there, and I said, I'll make a deal. Okay, I'll buy the one in North Durham, but you have to throw in the one on Guthrie. So, and she agreed, and it was great. So she was happy. I was happy. And then, you know, I just researched all the recent transactions up in that neighborhood of North Durham, and I actually found a few investors that were working and renovating up there. So I just called the investor's broker, and believe it or not, she said, yeah, sure, we're looking for another deal. I said, yeah, it's very similar to what you did around the corner. She said, yeah. They gave me an offer, $25,000 over, and there you go. Within whatever it was, 45 days, you make 25 grand. That was kind of nice. That's good for cash flow. Assignment, obviously, you have to have your ducks in a row and the right paperwork. I don't do any assigning, but there are professionals out there who are really good at it. You know, my thing is rental properties and building to rent and doing some selling of new builds. So obviously, having a rental property generates cash flow. But with a caveat, just because it's generating rent, are you cash flow positive? So, you know, maybe that's something that we can dive into on, you know, future presentations that, you know, often some of my properties that I've been holding for 7, 8, 9 years, you know, Matt and I are kind of in the cycle of, okay, well, it's really good rent, it's not bad, but if the tenant ever moves out, we're going to have to sink in quite a bit of money to really update it up to the current standards, because, you know, how the tenant has been living in it has been perfectly fine and happy for the tenant, but the next tenant may not be so, or if you have a different idea for this property, well, the neighborhood has really improved or gone down, and therefore that will help me assess the type of turnover. Am I doing a major renovation? Am I doing a light renovation? Is this a Section 8 rental where I'm going to have to substantially improve it to meet Section 8 standards? So whether or not, if that tenant moves out, how much cash is going to be needed versus what you're going to collect, and obviously factoring out your taxes, insurance, your loan payments, and all that. Is it actually cash flow positive, or is it something where we sell 1031 into something that doesn't need to be renovated, and then boom, you have consistent cash flow without taking the 30, 40,000 or 20,000 out of your pocket to update it to current standards because the tenant has been in there for so long. You know, that is often the case when you buy an existing property with an existing tenant. Well, it's great for the tenant right now, but what happens if the tenant moves? Okay, well, you already closed your loan, and how are you coming out of pocket with it? Okay, I mean, the thing makes $1,500 a month. You factor out all your various deductions, but hey, if the tenant moves, I'm going to have to sink $15K. Well, it's really cash flow negative over the next 18 months. So why am I doing this, or what is the risk? Or if I do that, am I increasing the rent? Am I increasing the value? Do I then go to refinance my loan? Do I lump it in with another portfolio? And those are some of the ways that you can think of cash flow for rental properties. It doesn't have to be one-offs of each other. We'll get into a little case study a little bit later on.
Thomas,
yeah.
I have a question for you. So in terms of your rental property, when you first started out, did you kind of just do a flip from that first rental property, or did you kind of take out the equity to kind of buy your next property? Like, how did you get started, you know, when you had that first property?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think I'll talk about it in a future slide, but no, I'll address it now as well. So we started off by buying our first 5 properties with cash. And it was a completely different time. And that's why some of the things, if I relate back to how I started, is completely different with how you start now. Completely different. Obviously, the barrier to entry was extremely low back 10 years ago versus what we're battling with inflation and increased demand for the triangle and asset prices right now. So that's a little bit difficult to do. Obviously, it requires a whole bunch more money if you were to buy 5 properties and then take that to a bank where you have a free and clear bundle of 5 properties and get a line of credit off of those. And a line of credit, I believe, is preferable, and it's something we'll talk about because it gives you the freedom to choose when to use the money without having to worry about being charged interest on day one. So you can open up a $300,000 line of credit, and let's say you don't need the funds until 4 months from now. Well, you're not being charged anything for the first 3 or 4 months until you actually use that cash. And then if it's a revolving line, which, you know, ours was not, but we have a revolving line now, it allows you to fluctuate it and draw on it, pay it down, draw on it, pay it down based on your strategy. So to answer your question, no, I didn't do any selling. However, as compared to when I first started, we're doing more selling now. And this is what I was alluding to now about adapting, because asset prices have increased by so much. So it's a bit of a different strategy about generating cash flow and generating cash to acquire deals. And that's one thing I'll talk about. And I just want to be clear, how long does the meeting go until? Is it 7:15? I want to make sure I get through everything.
Well, 7, but I mean, if you go a little over, it's usually not a big deal.
All right, so we have 12 minutes. All right. As I'm sure you can tell, I can talk all day about this stuff. So I've actually had a few calls recently about some of my existing rentals for people who want to rent it and then do Airbnb. I don't do that, but it got me thinking. It's creative. Many landlords may not allow it, but some landlords might say, I don't care how I get my money as long as you pay me. So if you go onto Zillow or Craigslist and you rent an existing house, maybe you fix it up cosmetically just a little bit, and you do Airbnb and you manage it. And hey, if your rent's $1,200 and you're able to Airbnb net income, gross Airbnb income of $1,800, I don't know, what's that, for $50 a night on average, 30 days. I don't even know if that's even possible. I have no experience with Airbnb, but there are professionals out there that do it. But that's a great way to generate cash flow when you really need minimal out of your pocket to just go ahead and rent someone else's property. Obviously, it creates exposure to the rent, especially if you're not living there, but it's one way.
So Tom, just so you know, we have a member, Melanie Hawk, who teaches that arbitrage model of Airbnb, and she's actually presenting in June at our main meeting. So anyone who's interested in that concept, make sure and catch that, because it's interesting, and you know, there's a way to do it with the landlord and stuff like that.
Yeah. So then, of course, you know, the traditional ways: renovate to sell, build to sell. Now, what I'm good at, which I think is the perfect way to generate cash flow, both on a sale and a rental, is subdividing, and whether or not you sell the land or sell your new builds. That is the critical thing I want to talk about today, which is really the bread and butter of this kind of market that we're in, taking advantage of high asset prices while at the same time acquiring and building assets that we want to hold for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And especially building new, building to rent, you minimize your maintenance costs so much. It's so great if you can get the cash available to put it up for a new build, which, as we all know, building costs are rising, land costs are rising. So the question is, how do we knock that down a bit, right? So, you know, obviously source of funds, this is very simple. We'll get into the next, what I was alluding to about the subdivide. How to leverage source of funds. I'm a big believer in community banks. I think you should know at least 10 to 15 community banks, or even independent mortgage brokers who can create the introduction at community banks. But there are so many community banks that acknowledge the success and the stability of the triangle that I think we're just in a tremendous opportunity here to work with community banks in our area. Now, one thing I want to suggest or recommend, which creates flexibility, that I'm not, in the beginning we used hard money, and I know people use hard money from many transactions now, and I'm not opposed to it. What I'm saying is community banks offer less fees, obviously a much lower rate, and you really strike a relationship that could be very much long. But the question is, can you combine a traditional loan or a community bank loan and fill the gap with hard money line of credit or a hard money loan? So one of my suggestions, if feasible, is identify a source for hard money lenders to put their lien on that's not related to your current project. Is it possible for you to buy a $250,000 house or a $200,000 house or a duplex, whether it's free and clear or have a tremendous amount of equity? If you own a house, asset prices are up so much. Can you get a home equity line of credit because you're an owner occupant there? Can you use that funds to buy an investment property at a 40% loan to value ratio, where you can go to a hard money lender and say, listen, whether in addition to personal guarantees and a loan that you can put onto this property to secure your whatever, $100,000 or $80,000, whatever it might be, just so that you can make it easier on the goal, the project at hand, whether you're renovating to sell, renovating to keep, whatever your strategy might be. Try to get one or two assets. Like Matt and I are always good about keeping a few assets, whether it's 3 or 4 assets, free and clear. So we have flexibility to, if we're in a short-term crunch, where we can say, hey, we have these free and clear, let's do a short-term loan on that to fund this project that we're doing, because we know this project is going to sell in a few months. And then once it sells, we're going to put that money right back. And then those assets are free and clear. And it just adds flexibility to your source of funds for you to complete the project and generate the cash flow. So one, and this is good timing too, because we're nearing 7 and I might go a little bit over. So this is a great transaction. Believe it or not, it's good timing that we are doing the presentation today, because I just closed on this transaction yesterday. All right. And I think it's perfect to talk about for generating cash flow by mirroring a few different strategies. Not necessarily the strategies about being a broker or a wholesaler or a signing or anything like that, but I'm talking about the strategy of building to sell, taking advantage of your profit, and also building to rent and generating rental cash flow. That's 2 great ways to create cash flow in real estate, in my opinion. You're building to sell, you're collecting your margins, that's awesome. It's cash, that's great. you're using that cash, or maybe you're not using that cash, but you're also building to rent. Your margins are great there. Your build to loan, your estimated rent, and you're generating positive cash flow with that. So that's tremendous. What else more do you want? I mean, unless there's private equity investors here that want to buy $100 million apartment building, which I don't think there are, but hey, whatever. I mean, we're not, right? We're in that zone of 500,000 to $1 million to $2 million, or if you're building Celia, it's not going to be any less than that. I mean, to build a small lot house in Durham is 250, 260,000. That's not counting your land costs. So I want to, let's see, I'm sharing my screen, but I want to get out of this and I want to get to here. Let me go here first. Okay. Can everyone still see my screen? And do you see the Durham Maps GIS system?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so this is
Hey, Tom,
historic.
before you go, do you want, there's a couple questions. Community banks is the same as credit union? That's a question. And someone's asking if you would throw out a few names of those community banks you were referring to.
Oh yeah, so I don't have any relationship with credit unions, so I don't know how to answer that. Obviously, State Employees Credit Union is probably the most popular, but I don't have a relationship there. But community banks, Benchmark Community Bank is absolutely awesome. I love Benchmark. North State Bank is great. Home Trust for building, great. Town Bank is more of a regional bank for portfolios or rentals, absolutely phenomenal. Zenith, we haven't done too much work with them recently. M&F Bank is good. Their underwriting's a little intense. Let's see, who else? Providence Bank out of Rocky Mount, absolutely awesome. And no experience with this one, but I heard Dogwood in Raleigh. We're actually looking to make a connection there. But
another really good one is KS Bank out of Garner.
Okay.
And what about Fidelity? Have you ever used them?
Fidelity, yes, we closed a SBA loan for our commercial building. Yeah, Fidelity's good. Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks. Someone is asking, do you just site build or do you use manufacturers' homes, i.e. build off site and then move them to the site?
All site built. Matt and I actually do the designs ourselves, so we're pretty proud of that. So it's just fun. We do it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. I could show you definitely a one of our plans that we have. It's really good.
Tom, if you want to make a little series out of what you're doing here tonight, we can do that and have you on a few months in a row. If you wanted, because I think people are really interested in what you're saying, and sounds like you have a lot more to say.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, let me, we have a few more minutes, so I might go 5 minutes over or so, and I'll just tell you about this deal, and this will highlight some of the things. So, and again, I don't know the zoning district in Wake County. I heard Wake County also has small lot homes, but I would seriously look into that because the margins are phenomenal. All right, so anyways, closed on this yesterday. The land, well, there are 2 existing houses and 1 land. This house burnt down and the owner had it removed well before we bought it. So we purchased 506 Spruce, 1801 Southgate, 1803 Southgate, and it's on a corner. I will caveat, no matter where you are, if you're thinking about subdividing, go and find out whatever the email address is, whoever you have to call, go downtown, make sure there's sewer in your street. It sounds stupid, right? To say, hey, make sure there's a sewer line in your street. You wouldn't believe how we're getting into small infill subdivisions that this was not contemplated 20, 30 years ago, however long sewer infrastructure was laid down. There are gaps in every city of where sewer lines are. So I may say, I want to build a small lot here, but what if there's no sewer that fronts my lot? What if it only goes here? And what if it stops here? Because that's where this house is, that's where these houses are. What if there's no sewer here? So always look to make sure there's sewer in front of your proposed lots. So we did, but this is good, but we've been burned on a few others. Okay, so we bought $445,000. Now the good thing here is that this one's gone, so we can build here. We can hold these 2 while we build, And these rents will help offset the note on not only the purchase, but also the construction finance. It's not going to cover it, okay, but it's going to lighten the load, which is kind of nice. Once that's done, then we can go ahead and, if you can see here, this is Spruce, this is Southgate. You can see my new subdivision map right here. This is not a survey by any means. The surveys are almost done. And then once the survey is done, we're going to use exempt plats, so we don't have to go full-blown site plan. And we're going to maintain this lot for our duplex. We're going to carve this up into small lot single family houses. You're going to get 4. And then we're going to flag this for another full size. Now, the goal here in terms of generating cash flow is we're going to build each of these small lots for about $250,000, $260,000. Now, East Durham, the values aren't quite there as compared to downtown. So let's just say they sell for 400, right? So you're going to catch 140, 140, 140, 140. Everyone do the math, 400,000, 160. So you're at $560,000 worth of profit, okay? That $560,000 more than covers what I just paid for the land, okay? So we're actually in the plus $115,000 as compared to our $445,000 purchase. So what that means is 2 things. I just basically got 2 duplex lots free. In addition to that being free, I actually now have $115,000 of profit to now offset, divide that by 2, that's 57.5 or 55, whatever it is. 115,000, 60, you get the point, 155,000 each. So if my build costs come in for my duplexes at, let's say, $600,000, now I have about $55,000 less per duplex to put towards it. So if our lender says, hey, you need to put 20% down on your $600,000 new build, all right, that's 120,000 minus the 55 that we have from the profit here. You're actually reducing your cash flow, your cash exposure to these things. So you're basically getting land free and clear. You're getting cheaper duplex builds, right? And then you're generating cash flow from that, right? So I think right now in this kind of market, I think you seriously look for oversized lots. And now I'm telling you this, let's say you're not a builder or you're not a buy and hold. If you're a broker, you know how to sell it. If you're an assigner, if you're a wholesaler, you know how to sell it. You know where the value is. You know how you can go to many of your investors and say, hey, this is what I think I can do over here. Check it out, get a survey, talk to your surveyor about it. And this is how you demonstrate value and sell it. So whether it's for yourself or you're generating commissions as a broker or assignment or double close fees, this is a great way to sell your case and generate cash flow. So, you know, we could talk about this for a while, but you know, this is generally one way what you can do in this kind of market to offset these high prices and to do it right. So not only does this transaction have a build to sell and a build to rent type, I hate the word model, but whatever, everyone has a model, but you know, it's just a strategy, we'll call it. You also have a tax strategy. So we sold a property. We gained our gain, I forget what it is on paper, but it was one of the early ones. So we had a paper gain. We're taking those funds, we're taking those gains, and because these properties, these existing properties on Spruce and Southgate are in an opportunity zone, we're taking our gains, we're putting it into this fund. So we're not being taxed on our capital gains from the sale that we did on the same day. So in addition to not being taxed there because it's an opportunity zone, we're also building, and if we hold for a long time, the opportunity zone, you know, may talk to your CPA and say, hey, if you hold these things for 10 years, you're not going to pay capital gains on what you're building here. These are all the caveats. I'm not a CPA. These are all the hot button issues you need to talk about with your CPA. In addition to that, since you're holding the duplexes, you're going to be able to accelerate your depreciation on those duplexes. And let's say you're able to accelerate about $100,000 to $150,000 worth of depreciate on your duplex. I don't care where you are, maybe out in Malibu or something like that, but the duplex in East Durham is not going to generate $150,000 of rent every year. So that means your depreciation is going to create that paper loss. That paper loss is then going to flow through to your spouse's active W-2 income if he or she has a job. Then you're going to get a fat refund check at the end. So obviously I flew through that and talked really quickly, but that is generating cash flow in a nutshell. I had another case study. It was very similar, same thing. And we could talk about it in the next one, but they're very, very similar. So I want to leave up my last slide here. That's all.
If you guys are interested in, in exploring this in more detail as a sort of mini series over the next couple months, stick a note in the chat and let us know, and we'll have Tom back because he gave a really great overview, but time constraints. Yeah, everybody's saying yes, Tom. So
okay.
Let's do it. That is awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. And all right, so we'll plan that with Tom, and you guys look for this next month, as long as he's available and as many months as he needs to make this a little series, we'll do that for y'all.
Are there any questions or anything? I went very fast at the end, so.
If you have any questions or anything in particular you'd like to see him cover regarding this topic next time, obviously it sounds like he has a case study, which would be cool. But if there's anything else you'd want to ask now or would like him to address next time, go ahead and stick that in the chat or unmute yourself and talk. But everyone,
yeah, feel free to unmute and let's chat, ask questions, ask anything, even if I didn't cover it. I'd be happy to take any kind of questions. I find it hard to believe that if you're here, I find it hard to believe that you don't have any questions.
Tom?
It's true.
Hey, Tom?
Yes.
Yes, this is Daryl. How you doing?
Daryl. Daryl Moore?
Yes, sir.
Oh, hey, how's it going?
Good, sir. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom.
Sure.
On the build aspect, with the delay of materials, do you find that to be a problem?
It's frustrating. It surely is. And then the question is, do you take a risk? Like this project on Spruce Southgate. I closed on the land. I own it. One house is already gone. We didn't get our survey back. We don't have a plot plan. We don't have any approvals from the city, but windows take 16 weeks, 20 weeks. Do I order my windows now? What happens if the city says, hey, Tom, you're crazy. I'm sorry, we deny this building permit. I don't think that will happen, but you never know with the city. So yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of risk involved.
That's why I was asking about the offsite build where you put your foundation and, you don't have to worry about delay in rain or weather constraints.
I don't know anything about offsite builds. Talking about like the modular stuff.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wouldn't be able to help you out on that one.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate you.
Sure.
I've got a couple suggestions for things to cover, and I'm making notes, and I'll send you an email about that.
Sure.
Anyone else? Anything at all? It's your chance. You can ask anything you want.
Anything. Yeah.
Okay, well, we will check in with Tom as he is available in May to expand on this topic and maybe put a little mini series together. We'll definitely have him back so you guys can bring your questions then. Thank you to everyone who put a suggestion in the chat for topic. I've written them all down and I'll email them to Tom, and if he is willing to undertake those, then we'll get him on. We'll get him on this meeting.
Sounds good.
All right, you want to stick your contact information up there one more time real quick in case anybody didn't get it?
Yeah, let's see here. Can you see it now?
Yep, there it is. And anybody who wants it, take note, and then we'll end the meeting. And thank you, Tom, so much. This is the first time we've had him on Zoom, but he's spoken for us at a couple live meetings for new investors, and is always really a great speaker and generous with his time and information. And we certainly very much appreciate it. He's a great speaker, so I would love it if he'd agree to do a few little series in a row. That would be super awesome.
Sure. I'm happy to do it.
All right. I'll shoot you an email. Other than that, thank you, everybody. Have a good night, and we'll see you next meeting.
All right. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.